Welcome, golfers. Better Golf with Kevin and Jake Haime, episode 5. Everyone does that. I guess we should do that. It kind of seems like you don't have to really count. I don't know. Episode 162. Welcome, Jake.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, man. In our studio here at our golf center, surrounded by drivers, surrounded by brand new, beautiful, sparkly clubs that everyone is dying to get their hands on. So the newest from Callaway, TaylorMade, Ping, Titleist, Cobra, Shrixon, Mizuno.
It's been a good year.
It's all great equipment. It's really good. Anyway, today is our speed show. We're going to talk about speed and fallacies and getting club fit. I know you and I am struggling a little bit this morning, man. I mean, these weekends are tough. We've had if you're listening from anywhere in the world, we've had a very, very difficult time in Eastern Ontario, Canada this year. And I mean, we've been unplugging balls in the mud for 6 weeks now. We're 6 weeks into opening our golf center, and it was feels like -5 Celsius the other day.
Yeah, it's a bizarre year. You know, we always have to do a little bit of that. I think for a month or so, we always have to go out every night and pick balls, and you get used to it over years of doing it. But this is a tough year.
Anyway, a little tired, but we're also tired not only from our maintenance habits the last month, but people are rabid in the springtime in Canada to hit golf balls and really everywhere in the world. Spring is, the Masters happened with Tiger Woods. I've still got the glow on after that. That was just a fantastic experience.
I'm starting to come down.
Really great. Couple of weeks back, Brooke Henderson, our hometown girl, won on the LPGA Tour last week over in Hawaii.
That was phenomenal too.
Has now tied the all-time number with Mike Weir and Sandra Post, who's a sweetheart, by the way, and was a brilliant talent in her day. But Brooke is now... So we've had a couple of things happen in golf, but for you and I, it's morning to night bookings and club fittings.
Teaching and fitting and teaching and fitting and teaching and fitting.
Yeah, I don't know what you've got today, but I've got a business lunch about our charity event coming up with Brooke Henderson in a couple of weeks, and then I've got 5 lessons, and I think you're right through. I think one of mine's a fit today. But
I have, 6 lessons and 2 fits.
That's interesting. My background, Jake, as you know, right out of college, right out of University of Illinois, I went to a 3-day kind of school, I guess, on club fitting back in 1992. Might have even been before that, but I think I started fitting in 92. And it was from a company called Henry Griffiths, who, in my mind, were real pioneers in club fitting. I don't think everything they touched was perfection, but they had screw-on heads back in the early 90s, and we're talking a long time ago.
Definitely ahead of their time. The only problem is they didn't then innovate past that to keep up with the time, or else I still believe be a great golf club company.
Well, or Jake, maybe what happened is all the other companies, they didn't monetize and advertise properly, and all the other companies got into the gig. And, if an average customer had a choice between a Henry Griffiths 5-iron or a Ping, Ping seems a lot more attractive to most. And all the companies now, all the major companies are doing a wonderful job with club development and the science of developing great equipment.
For sure.
The people who aren't doing a wonderful job are the average players who want to hit that ball farther, but many, many, many of them just go into a store still and buy a club based on the name brand on it. And they don't get fitted. And I think we'll talk about speed today, but just the fitting process a little bit. The things we see, the tendencies we see that are alarming with so many people. And then things you can do in your golf swing to develop speed, right? A speed show and what's important and what isn't. And I think everybody's kind of chasing down the wrong pathway, trying to hit the ball harder by swinging bigger and trying to turn more and lift and wind up like crazy. And I mean, the science will tell you, and will tell you today, that's not really the secret to your ball traveling farther, So.
No, I mean, the basic point that will not surmise everything we're going to talk about, but I think is a fair encapsulation of it is ball speed is really what matters for distance. It's not club head speed. Technically, your club head speed's irrelevant because if 2 people produce the same ball speed with totally different golf swings, they're going to hit the golf ball based on spin and flight and all those things approximately the same distance. That being said, if you swing faster, there is more potential energy there, so you could have more ball speed. But as a general statement, it's how fast you hit the ball It's not how fast you swing the club to hit the ball.
Pros really look at ball speed. They look at launch angle. They look at spin. They look at land angle as well, right? The landing angle, how that ball's coming out of the sky. But that's really based on launch and speed and spin. All of those things combine. But I think the great fallacy in golf, and it probably exists in the diet industry, it probably exists in other industries, is that if I can just swing this club faster, the ball will go farther. And while that is true, you can't say club head speed doesn't matter. But centeredness of hit,
it's true on an equal
angle
hit.
of club, pathway of club.
On an equal hit, it's true. On an equal hit, if you hit the ball exactly the same with 2 swings, if you swung faster, the ball will go farther.
You see that thing in Golf Digest last week, and it was one of the triggers that, had you and I discussing this and what to talk about today. What did they say? The average man is upwards of 94 miles an hour, which coincidentally is what an LPGA Tour pro hits a golf ball.
Yeah,
right?
so the average, the number, I have the article in front of me. The number for men is 93.4 miles an hour, the average man.
Which is pretty fast. So
yeah, that's one thing actually that I said to you that I took away from it. Most individuals buy regular shafts when they go into golf and say, I hit it 230, I need a regular. Well, as fitters, I'll tell everybody that if you're anywhere between 89 to 91, we're having a discussion in terms of whether you need stiff or regular based on tempo and based on swing. If you're at 93.5 miles an hour, you're a stiff shaft. It's pretty much universal.
Yeah.
Well, there are rare exceptions
93.
where
I mean,
super heavy regular is a good idea.
Yeah.
But 90% of people, I think it's fair to say.
So when you're fitting to stiffness too, you're looking at change in direction, rhythm, how they load and unload the club, and there are situations where people are slow and rhythmic, and a certain shaft works a certain way for them. So I don't want everyone who's 93 to run out and buy a stiff, like that's an answer either. But yeah, it surprises me that the average male golfer is in that stiff shaft mid-90s range, which, by the way, is the same average on the LPGA Tour.
Yeah, so if men are at 93.4, the women are at 93.9.
And what's the PGA Tour?
113.
113. So here's the thing: 94 miles an hour. But in this particular column, they did Arcos, which is a wonderful product. It's in Ping golf clubs. It's an upcharge with Ping. You can get it in Cobra golf equipment included. Not only if you buy a set of Cobra irons, not only do they give you the Arcos grips to track all your stats through the app, the Arcos app, but they also give you extra modules that you can put on all your other clubs. So they're really into data collection. I also saw a tweet by John K. Solheim, who was flying over to Europe, and said, I've got my Arcos with me and my carry-on. And so he's getting into it as well. And as well, we all should. The science is there. We should be using it. Right?
Yeah, that is not, by the way, we're not, sponsored by either company, but the fact that Cobra's been on board for years and that Ping is on board, starting to get on board with the Arcos stuff.
We're not sponsored by anybody yet.
No, I know. That's what I'm saying, though. We're not just selflessly promoting those two, but I will say that's actually a huge value add Cobra's had for a couple of years now that no one really talks about. It's a really cool feature on their golf clubs. That it's included in the grip.
It is. It's pretty neat. Anyway, their data shows that average man who swings 94 miles an hour hits it 214 yards in the air. And that if all of his conditions were correct, and we're going to tell people about the conditions and what to do to improve them today. If all his conditions were correct, was it 255 or 245?
It was 255. So I think the track.
So they're losing 40 yards.
Yeah.
Right? They're losing 40 yards of distance with the same club head speed. And so here we are chasing the wrong rabbit down the wrong path because they're trying to swing harder because they're not hitting it far enough. And they're buying another $600-700 driver. Which probably they would probably need to, because odds are the one they have is wrong. But that 40 yards is technique, and it's understanding body motion and how the club needs to move better to speed the ball up, right? That's the real secret. So the analogy I always use with people is, if you go to punch someone in the nose, I don't know why I use this analogy, but if you're going to punch someone in the nose with your fist, if you squish right into the middle of their nose, you'll break their nose. And it's a heck of an impact, not even with that much force. Whereas if your fist is on an angle and it glances across and it can glance off their cheek and there's almost no impact. Not because you didn't swing your fist as hard or hit the item as hard, but you just don't have that solid contact, that squishiness, right?
Mhm. Yeah, for sure.
I
for
should
sure.
probably change that trick that's not
No,
really
I like it. It's a visceral example. Everyone gets
it's
it.
visceral. Yes, it's visceral. But like anything else, if you make solid contact. So when you squish a golf ball with the center of the face on the center of the ball at the right path and face angle, the ball jumps more,
Totally.
way more,
Totally.
lot more transfer of energy, right? So it's an interesting kind of thing for people to think about. So I think the idea is to stop swinging bigger and longer and twisting and lifting and shifting and throwing your legs at it and doing anything you can to develop what you think is more speed, which, by the way, a lot of times our launch monitors are telling us people swing slower when they try harder.
A lot of the time.
They get tension, and they have a harder time getting their weight to their lead foot and letting that club swing around them properly.
Well, I know we're going to get into the swing stuff later, so I don't want to dive too deep down into it now, but the simple way to say that is that's where the whole swing soft, hit hard myth comes from. Right? Everyone says if you swing soft, you'll hit it hard. It's not because swinging slow makes the ball go far. You got to swing fast to hit the ball hard. That being said, when you feel like you're moving slower, generally your body's moving better. So a lot of people actually produce more club head speed. Yeah. And even if they don't produce more club head speed with what feels like a slower swing, they're hitting the ball more centered and more properly. So they might lose 2 miles an hour of swing speed, but they gain that back in spades and ball speed. So the trick wasn't, hey, if you swing easy, the ball will go far. The trick was if you hit it properly, the ball will go far. But the person feeling like they swung a little easier was the way they were able to do that.
Yeah, if you're in better balance, we encourage so many people to feel the weight in their feet as they stand over the ball. Get the weight in the middle of your feet and kind of keep it in the middle of your feet while you're swinging. You want the weight to flow towards your back leg and then obviously towards your front leg as you load and unload. But when people pay attention and they're a little more deliberate in their swinging and it feels slower maybe to them, everything else will kind of, the better balance will lead to a better path, a better change in direction of the club, probably a squarer hit, and so they'll hit the ball farther. So it's not true. I kind of giggle at that one too when people say I'm swinging slower and hitting it farther. You're just making better contact, but if you could make that same contact with a faster swing, you'd hit it farther again. So slowing down isn't a secret.
The misconception is that it's also a slower swing. You don't know that. You're not on a launch monitor checking it. I've seen a lot of people who I'll show them 2 shots just to prove my point. One will look like I swung really hard at it, and I'll throw a number out there, 114 or whatever, and then I make another swing where I look like I swing half the speed, and I'm 3-4 miles an hour faster because my body cleared out the proper way, and I rotated through the ball faster, even though the energy didn't look as violent, and I actually hit the ball harder.
Yeah, so that's a good statement. So people see the out of balance, motion, lifting out of posture, legs moving around, and it feels like they're working harder. But the more efficient you can be, and if you have an axle with something rotating around it, if the axle doesn't move, if your spine stays in posture and in tilt, if you keep your posture when you swing and kind of keep your spine tilt, which is, important as well, and just let the club swing around you, orbit around you is a word I like to use, then you'll get a little bit more speed. So stop trying to move around so much and understand that you hit a driver farther than a 7-iron because the club's longer, so it's moving faster when it hits the ball, but your body shouldn't do more, right? We've got that, what was that gears thing? I did that. I think I put it in a magazine that wasn't my torso moving about the same speed as...
Yeah, so actually, for those of you watching, you can see it up on our TV behind us.
Oh, yeah, you put it up there.
We have, just to show it, we have 2 swings beside each other, same part of your downswing with an iron and a driver. And what we spend a lot of time in our gear suit with irons because most people work on their golf swing with
explain what a gear suit is.
So gear suit is our 3D motion capture system. So same technology, literally, that they use in video game capturing and in movies to do CG effects.
Yeah, you dress them up with the markers, and we just create an avatar, throw it in the software. In my mind, it's the best body motion teaching aid, if you call it that, in golf.
Yeah, it's also the most accurate way to do it, right? There are systems starting to come out that we've looked into that are, simpler systems that do 3D models, and they're starting to do a camera version on the PGA Tour broadcast.
Yeah.
But by putting markers on somebody, you can really
doesn't look
check.
very good. What is that one they're doing on TV? It looks like there's
I don't know. I don't remember what the name
Peter
of it is.
Costas was doing one a couple of weeks ago, and it had this really lousy graphic.
Yeah,
looking.
graphically it's not great. But even, I mean, we're not just saying the gear system's better graphics for the record. We're also saying it's better graphics. It's a more user-friendly experience, but it's also better data, right? Because you're getting static measurement. Anyway, if you look at your kinematic sequence with both, so everyone, kinematic sequence is the way you unwind your body as you swing down to the
from
golf
the ground
ball.
up, right? We wind up from the top down. We wind up in golf, and then we unwind from the ground up.
Yeah, ideally, for sure. So what should happen is your pelvis should rotate slower than your torso, which is slower than your arms, which is slower than your golf club. And that should make sense, right? For most of us, I think most of us understand our legs are supposed to move into the golf ball first, that bump into the target to change direction. But the fact that it moves first and you haven't rotated your hips as much as anything else in your golf swing, when you wind properly, that means that it can't rotate the fastest. Everything has to speed up to catch up to it.
Yeah.
And that's where that, whip effect a lot of people talk about comes to, and the club gets hit hard.
Absolutely.
If we look at your driver numbers, what we're getting at here is that your pelvis numbers with your iron, 475, your pelvis rotation with your driver, 488. So we're very, very, very similar. Rib cage rotation with your iron, 626. Rib cage with your driver, 606. So very, very similar again, and actually a little bit slower in the driver.
Yeah, neat.
With your arms, 953 with the iron, 945 with the driver.
A little slower again.
So what we're seeing is that you're not actually moving faster or rotating faster with the driver. What you're doing actually is rotating very similar, and if anything, a fraction slower, because you're not moving onto your front leg quite as fast, because your stance is wider, your angle behind.
At this point, Jake, I think, it's incredibly surprising to me as a competitive golfer for 45 years who hits drivers and hits 7-irons. It sure feels like there's more going on in the driver.
Well, there is with the club, and
I
that's
think
what
it
we're
fools
getting
everybody. It fools everybody. Here I am, though. There are my numbers, and it's basically the exact same body motion.
Yeah.
And I think if you make me think about it, I would say, yeah, I don't try to swing faster with a driver, but it feels faster because the club's moving quicker at the bottom, right? And then even the ball taking off with more ferocity. It's just a different hit.
Yeah, our perception always isn't our reality, right? So the thing I think that most people...
I'm saying even for me, that's the surprising thing.
Agreed.
I think we'll tell people all the time, hey, swing the same speed with every club. Doesn't matter which club you swing with. But when you actually see the numbers based on a hard hit 7-iron and a hard hit driver, the parts of the body are moving faster with the 7-iron. It's amazing.
So again, that validates our point of trying to hit the ball harder isn't the solution. It's hitting the ball properly. And then with your driver, you need to create the right launch conditions. And I guess that's where we should start talking about what those are.
Yeah. So, the whole thing is about don't try to swing bigger. Don't try to move around more. Don't try to turn more. Don't try to, wind up like crazy. The same controlled move you'd make with a 7-iron, and because of the club and the way the wrist set and the club hinges around you, it's a longer club. The swing will look a little longer. It's a little longer. Sure. There's a little bigger arc to it. But you're basically trying to move your body at the same speed in a very similar fashion. But the real key to start understanding how to hit the ball farther, if we've dispelled the myth of swinging harder, buying another club, randomly that says it hits it farther.
I don't know though. I'm going to pause you for a second there. I don't know that buying a new club is a myth.
Well, if you get fit.
I just think if you get... Yeah. Exactly.
But that's not what people do.
No, if you just go buy a club at the store, it's not the magic.
I'm a Callaway guy, so I had the Rogue last year, and now I want the Epic Flash. It's the new best one, so I'm going to go out and buy it. And if you don't get the right club that gives you proper launch conditions and enables you to do all the right things, it's a total waste of time.
Yeah, you're not going to get...
We see that a lot. We see
all the time.
Okay, so what you should be doing, everyone, is trying to create, back to that Golf Digest article where you're swinging at 94, but you're only hitting at 214 where you could hit 255. So the speed is there. The 94 is pretty impressive. You can hit it 255 or in the air, plus roll, 270 maybe, on a firmish course. Get 15 yards of roll. I mean, that's pretty good, right? That's a pretty good number. But what happens is, does that include roll?
That includes roll.
So 214 includes roll?
I guess so, yeah. But most people wouldn't get a lot of roll, right? Because if you're hitting high spinny shots, which is what we're about to get into, you get almost no roll.
Anyway, 255 is still plenty far for the average person. But your path is really important. controlling the way your body moves to get the club moving into the golf ball properly instead of cutting across, being too steep from the outside, or hitting way from underneath, from way into out to hit a big hook or a block. Really thinking about the bottom half of your golf swing and getting your club to move the right way into the ball.
Mm-hmm.
Having the club face be square relative to that path.
Important.
Very important, which means a neutral grip. A lot of people talk about hitting it with their backhand or...
Yeah, I hate that thought.
You want quiet, neutral hands so you get the middle of face moving into that golf ball. And then attack angle, very important. A lot of people hit down at the golf ball, especially because they hit from out to in. And then how much loft is on the club. I mean, those are your variables. The path of the club, the squareness of the face relative to that, the angle you hit into the ball, right? And then how much loft's on. And, of course, the club head speed is there, too. It all combines in that kind of combination to give a certain kind of flight and launch and spin. But we got to start being way more cautious about being on the right path, hitting it at the right angle with the square face to create distance without hitting it without any distance at all. Don't need any more speed. Speed at all. Yeah. That makes that happen.
Quality of hit. Hit the ball better, the ball will go farther.
Yeah, ball flight laws, right? So your golf club, everybody, can basically be traveling three ways. It can be traveling from out to in, from in to out, or on a proper path.
Yes.
Right? As it moves into the ball.
Slightly in to slightly in.
There's endless variables of how much left to right or right to left, but basically it can be going from out to in, into out, or into the ball properly. Yes. So if we can control that, if we can figure out what we do first of all and control that, it's great. Right? And then the club face can either be closed, square, or open. So if I'm hitting from out to in as a slicer would, the club is coming too far from the outside to in, and my club face is square to that path, I'll pull the ball.
And by the way, for most people to understand, that's what you think is a draw. I think one of the things we see very commonly in lessons is people are cutting across the golf ball, and one thing people need to understand, they don't change path randomly between swings. If you're 5 degrees outside, you didn't randomly come 5 degrees inside on the next shot. Your body does what your body does. So the thing you need to understand, and this is why you say you need to know what you do. And
the face angle is the variable.
The face angle is the variable. So face is king. If the face points left, with reasonable certainty, the ball will go left. If the face points right, the ball will go right. It's 75% of the equation with an iron approximately. It's 85% of the equation with the driver approximately.
Yeah, so I think, Jake, people can figure this out. So when you look at your shot, if it starts to the left and curves a certain way, what was the path and what was the face angle? So if you're out to in all likelihood, the ball, if the face is really
super open,
but it might not, but it'll start to the left. Let's say a right-handed player,
sure.
Out to in, it'll start to the left. And then if the face is closed relative to that, smother hook. If the face is square, pull. And if the face is open, which is what 70% of people listening to this do, then they're going to bleed it from too far in, and it's going to slice out.
Yeah, and the reason we all do it is because when you hit a pull with an outside path, you hit it really far, you hit it really strong, but you're never going to hit your target that way. So your body subconsciously realizes, hey, I'm hitting it left. I got to do something to fix this. And instead of changing your path because you don't know how to do that, you let your hands open the face a little bit, and it brings it back to target.
Coming too far from the inside, the ball will tend to start out, for a right-handed player, out to the right.
Yes.
If the face is square, you hit a block or a push. If the face is open, you hit a push slice or a push fade. And if the face is closed, you'll draw it. So a little bit into out with a little bit of a face closed relative to that will draw it back on the target. So, much like a pull cut, we'll draw it or we'll fade it back onto the target.
So just as an aside to everybody here, a quick note, figure out what you're doing. Because one thing that drives me up the wall in lessons is people will block it and say, I slice every time because it's going to the right. Or people will pull it and say, I have a baby draw.
Yeah.
And they're trying to, I don't care.
Well, you're right about that. But how do they ever fix it if they don't even know what they're doing, right?
That's what I'm getting at. And by the way, I don't care what you call your shot. It doesn't bug me that you use the wrong name. What bugs me is that they're blocking the golf shot and they think they're slicing. And so they read all these anti-slicing drills and they're making their swing worse and worse and worse.
Really interesting.
So
right on.
Tips online are fantastic. There's lots of great content on there.
But you have to know what you're doing.
Exactly. You have to know if they refer to you or not. Because there are tips that are great for person A, but would make person B a way worse golfer, and the tip that works for person B might make person A worse. So if you don't understand why you're hitting where you're hitting and what shot you're hitting, it's really hard to get better at golf.
So this is an awesome time to tell everybody, even if you're not big on lessons, if you don't want to change your move for whatever, if you get on a launch monitor with a pro and you see your path and your face angle and your spin rate, you can start really learning and understanding what your potential is, how fast you
Great
actually
point.
swing,
Yeah.
and what you're doing wrong.
That's a good idea. Instead of, if you don't want to put the work in to move your change your move, at least understanding what your move is producing.
Well,
so
I think you would,
affect it.
but I just think there's a reluctance for people. I don't want to take lessons. He's going to change me. But getting on a launch monitor to at least understand that, no, you push the ball. You don't slice it. I know it goes to the right, but it's not a slice. It's actually a push. You're coming way from inside. So stop driving your legs even more, thinking that will bring the club to the inside because you're slicing it. You're actually not hitting that shot.
Great
right?
example. And anyway, I'm sorry for tangentializing there for a second. But let's get back to topic. But I just think it's really, really important for people to understand what ball flight they actually have and how that affects what
Well,
they're
listen,
doing.
there's not much more to say from that perspective. People need to understand the path of the club. They need to understand the face angle of the club when they're doing their standard shot. And, you say, well, the path doesn't change. It's a really good statement because people will say, well, I pull one and then I slice one. Well, that's just the face angle changing, and that's a timing issue. You're probably not, as you said, I've seen the odd guy who is out there and just trying to do something weirdly different every time, and he'll pull one and then push one.
The odd guy has proved me wrong on that statement.
But in a general sense, we're pretty repeating. And what doesn't repeat based on timing and rhythm is the face angle in relation to it. And by the way, the one it's most difficult to be consistent with is the driver because it's the longest golf club.
Yeah, it's moving the fastest.
So let's say a person cuts across the golf ball. They're out to in, which most people do because they're not in a great position at the top of their swing, so they come over the top a little bit.
It's easy to bail out with your arms, and when your arms begin your downswing, we're getting at the kinematic sequence again. When your arms begin your downswing, you throw your sequence out of rhythm, so you come over the top.
Yeah, so why do the arms start the downswing? Well, if your lower body doesn't, when you start your legs and your feet and your ankles and your thighs and then your hips and you work up, you hold the club off and it kind of drops in a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Whereas when you start with your arms or start with your shoulders, the club travels out away from your body. So you get that kind of out to in motion, right? That's something we see all the time. And when that happens with a 45.5-inch, 46-inch length golf club, it's very difficult with all the forces against you in physics to square the club up perfectly every single time when you're swinging across the golf ball.
Not to mention, it's more out of position, right? I think a lot of people assume that because the head's the biggest, especially when they're beginning, that the driver's easiest to hit. So give me a driver because I can't miss this thing. What we're getting at is that only hitting it in the center in the proper space is what matters, right? You need to hit the ball in the center of the face. So when you're swinging a driver, if your body's in the exact same position with a 7-iron and a driver, your club's on the exact same angle, and it's a little bit out of position with a 7-iron, the club's longer. So the club's now more out of position because it's increased the effect. It's like me having bad technique with a slap shot with my stick, and you say, okay, here's a Dano's Char stick, now pull it off. Well, I can't because the bad position gets exacerbated by the longer
Everybody got
stick.
that? When you swing down, if your club's traveling a little out in, if you're swinging a popsicle stick that's 3 inches long, the stick isn't that out of position. If you're swinging a telephone pole, that pole is way out of position.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it.
And when you go from a 37-inch length 7-iron to a 46-inch length driver, that club is more offline.
Mm-hmm.
Notwithstanding the fact, too, that with less loft, every time there's less loft in your golf club, when you hit a ball with less loft, there's more side spin imparted on the golf ball. So the wedge is really hard to slice because there's so much loft on it that it can't create that much, of a sideways spinning effect.
Yeah, well, think about this for a second, it makes sense. With a pitching wedge, most people are going to have somewhere between 8 and 10,000 RPMs of backspin. With a driver, we all know how we want little spin, right? You want about 2,600 spin to 3,100 spin, depending on how hard you hit it, for everybody. So if you're only spinning a third of the amount backwards with a driver than a pitching wedge, there's a lot more room to spin sideways.
Yeah.
it physically can't spin as much side, or the axis of spin can't tilt as much with the pitching wedge and have the ball go crooked because it's so busy spinning backwards and it can only spin so much.
You can't slice a wedge. Try to slice a wedge, everybody. If you thin it with the leading edge, you can kind of open the face and have it curve way off. But if you hit it squarely, even if you're cutting across it 8 degrees across your path, which is quite a bit. We see people on our launch monitor, Jake, up to 15 degrees across.
27 yesterday. I had a 27 yesterday. Believe it or not.
27? Really?
Yep.
Did you help him a bit, or did you just fit him into that
no,
swing?
no, of course. It was actually in a lesson. It wasn't even in the club fit.
27 across.
27 across.
Yeah. So think about it, everyone. Neutral path is making that nice little circle around you, and 27 degrees from out to in is really cutting across that ball. But even 5 degrees is enough to hit crooked shots.
Yep. For sure it is.
All right, so let's talk about. So from a club perspective, Jake, when we're fitting people, we're looking at so many things to try to help them out. Shorter club is one thing that can potentially help when so many golfers are hitting from out to in, right?
Yeah.
So many golfers are cutting across the ball due to a little bit of faulty swing that a longer golf club is a little more difficult to square and is a little more out of position. We just said that. So if you have a 46-inch driver, we find often that trimming that down, and what's tour average? Is it 44.5 or 44?
44.5. So for context, everybody, the average driver on the market is between 45 and 3/4 and 46 inches, depending on the company. A few companies are a little lower than that standard, but as a general statement, that's been the standard length for a driver for a long time. On the PGA Tour, the average in the last several years has been 44.5 inches, meaning that their clubs are a 1/4 inch shorter than standard ladies' length on a driver. And the reason the PGA Tour players are doing that is because some of them might lose 1 or 2 mile an hour of club head speed, but it's remarkable a lot of them don't.
Some swing faster.
Yeah. But even if they do lose a mile an hour or two of club head speed, they're hitting the ball more centered more frequently. So they're keeping or improving their distance while making it much more accurate.
Better contact, better ball speed.
And I saw that yesterday. I had a fit with a gentleman yesterday for a driver, and he had a 45 and 3/4 inch driver from before. Same company that we ended up fitting him into later, but with the modern driver cut down 1.25 inches, he hit the ball an average of 15 yards farther in the air.
Mm-hmm.
Because better contact. All of his numbers got better. His launch numbers got better. His spin numbers got better. Every single number across the board improved.
Yeah, I'd like to say, too, that it's not just... I think there's a fallacy out there that if you trim a club, it goes shorter, but it's worth it because you hit it more solidly. And that's the case sometimes, but other times the long club is awkward. If you're not that tall, if you're really cutting across it, if you don't have a ton of strength, the engineering behind the concept that the longer the club is, the farther you hit the ball, the given is that you can hit the middle of the face. If it's long and awkward for you, especially if you think about it, everyone, if we add 2 inches to your 7-iron and you're trying to hit it as consistently, you'd obviously say, well, I don't hit my 4-iron as consistently as my 7-iron. When you're adding length, it's more difficult to hit the center of the face every time. So sometimes it's awkward, and sometimes you'll give a person a shorter club and they swing in better balance with more confidence, and they actually gain club head speed. So I just wanted to say it's not necessarily that trimming a club means shorter but more accurate. It can mean longer, more speed, and more centeredness of hit. And now we go from that 214 in that Golf Digest article up towards that 255 if we're getting the club on a little bit better path, right?
Yeah, so the question, I guess, you alluded to it, but the question is then why are all these drivers so long? Because I would say a minimum of 50% of the fits I do, we shorten the shaft to some extent, whether it's half an inch to an inch.
Yeah, I know the answer why they're so long. What's
your
your answer?
If you're in a simulator at an unnamed retail golf store and you hit the ball farther in the simulator once because you happen to get the longer driver nailed right on the screws, you're going to think you hit the ball farther. You're going to buy that driver.
Yeah, I think so. 1 out of 10 times you might Jupiter and Mars might align and you hit it a couple of yards farther.
And we all tend to talk about what we can do, right? Not what we do on average. So if you say, how far do you hit it? And you hit 300 the other day, you go, I can hit a driver 300 yards. But you might have hit a bunch of them way shorter than that. You're not considering that your average. as a general statement, I guess I don't know why 46 seems to be the number. Clearly, it's the number where for most people, you then get diminishing returns. Where once you go longer than 46 inches, the average person just can't handle it. So the clubs have decided that 45 and 3/4 mark or the 46 inch mark
45 and a
maxed it
half
out.
even. It's
Right.
interesting. Titleist has gone to 45 and a half this year, and they're even calling it speed, right? It's all
Yep.
about speed, TS. But if the driver suits the person at that length, it's speed. If
Yeah,
it-
and frankly, I mean, Titleist sold average is 45. I fit more 45-inch Titleist drivers so far since the TS came out than I fit 45 and a
Yeah.
half. For some people, a little longer is not a bad thing. If you can handle it and you don't hit it worse, a little more length isn't a bad thing for you, but most of the time,
I think it's worth
better
a
shorter.
mention for the ladies too, that ladies' lengths are even more outrageous relative to their height. I mean,
A lot of the time.
companies are half an inch shorter than the men's length, and a lady's 5'2", and a man might be 6 foot.
Yeah.
That's another place. All right, so number one is we might consider trimming it if it puts us in better balance. If we're off the right path, if we're not in the right path, if we're on the wrong path and really cutting across the golf ball, then trimming it so we can square it easier through impact is probably a good idea.
Yes.
Right?
Agreed.
Okay, what about the shaft? So we've got, shafts are complicated, right? That's the moving part in the club. You've got flex, you've got twist or torque, you've got weight, you've got where the weight is in the shaft, and you've got flex point, where it flexes. So to think that you could walk into a store or a pro shop and randomly pick the right one with all those variables to create that square hit for that longer hit, I think it probably people are kind of, I hope, nodding in agreement when I say all that. And they're like, yeah, that'd be pretty lucky to have 7 variables, notwithstanding the length, even the grip size and everything about the head, to pick a shaft based on a brand name or based on what your buddy uses or based on what the company happens to put it in as a standard. I think the idea of not getting fit and nailing it is pretty slim. You've got weight, length, stiffness, kick point, and torque.
Especially if you're basing how far you hit it, because what we've already gotten at is that most people, the average man, has the swing speed that would require a stiff shaft. They hit it farther with a stiff, but they buy a regular because they go into wherever they buy their golf club and say I hit a 220. So especially if you're basing off your distance, add another problem on. If you're not hitting it square, you're not actually getting
there's a great thing to say. I mean, your distance is a little bit relevant, but if you go into a shop and you say, I hit it this far, and they say, here's the club for you, if you're 27 degrees, that's a ridiculous number, but if you're 27 degrees across,
yeah,
how far you hit it's totally irrelevant to what shaft you need, because your club head speed, you're very inefficient. So relating the distance you hit it to the shaft you buy is quite something. And I think, once we get people on the teaching tee, Jake, or on the fitting tee, and they hit something a little softer, something a little firmer, something with a higher kick point, lower kick point, something heavier, something lighter, even the change in direction at the top. I think there's another tendency I'm bothered about in golf a little bit, which is lighter is better because you can swing it faster and make the club super light. Well, that's great, but you can't feel that club in transition. So your timing and your rhythm might change. And you might be quick and anxious from the top because the club feels so light that you feel like you got to work a little harder to generate some speed. So
I would agree with that, but I would also say, to the credit of a lot of the club manufacturers, the trend is getting heavier again.
Well, and then the other trend is they offer everything. Like,
oh, now they do, yeah. Now they offer one
what's
of every.
that shaft in the pings, the
Distanza.
Vistanza, 40 some grams, and then they're all the way up to an
80 gram.
85X,
Yeah.
an 80 gram shaft. So if you get fit, if you take the time to find the right weight for you, the right flex point for you, the right amount of torque, which is kind of feel related to your timing and how you load and unload the golf club. If you just hit a few, you'd be amazed how different they all feel. And I just think people are, you open Golf Digest, there's a giant picture of a ping head there, and it's like Bubba Watson uses this ping head, and you go buy that ping head. But, you've got to go through the process of getting fit properly or trying them, And when you're with a pro who can guide you, that one's a little light, let's try this heavier one. This one flexes a little too low, your spin numbers are a little high.
Yeah.
So there's so many variables in the golf shaft.
Lots of variables. And the other thing, just to quickly, I think most people understand this as we're talking about it, but just for clarity, get fit before you buy the club. Because I've had a lot of people walk in for a series of lessons. They just bought their new driver. They're all excited about it. They're like, oh, at some point I want you to fit this to me. It's like, can't do that.
Yeah.
I
might
can
be able to change shaft.
adjust the settings maybe.
Yeah.
But,
Trim it a bit.
I can change the shaft because I got to go buy a new shaft. That's not changing the driver they bought.
Yeah, and if you trim it, you change the swing weight. Many of the companies today, if you custom order a golf club at a certain length, they'll actually change the weighting in the head so it swings properly.
Oh, yeah,
Like
for the
make it a
record,
D3 or...
I'm not saying we can't make the driver closer to right. If you buy a driver, then have someone who knows what they're talking about take a look at it. They can adjust the thing to make it better for you than it is. But that doesn't make it right. That's the point I'm making, is that if you're going to get fit and go through the process, which I agree with you, I find it crazy that people don't, knowing how much of a difference it makes. And you're willing to spend $700 and take a gamble. That makes no sense to me. But if you're going to get fit and you're going to put the time to do that, just make sure you do it before you buy the driver. It seems like a straightforward comment, but not everybody thinks of it that way.
So in the shaft, things that would make it not right for you, or let's just describe a few of the things, Jake. If a shaft is too light for you, you might be less consistent in your rhythm, in your transition, in your timing, because it's just too light. A light shaft will also tend to play a little softer and will maybe spin a little more on you because it's so light, the head might kick at the bottom, especially if it's not quite stiff enough for you. So a soft golf club in general, everyone, if you buy a club that's too whippy, for a general term on stiffness, you'll get kind of more, I call it hot air pop or flight. You'll hit them all over the place. Everything's different. The golf balls are jumping off the tee like the kernels of corn going in every direction. So inconsistency means too soft. If a club's too stiff, it'll feel hard and heavy. You might not be able to get through it. You might block it a lot or push it a lot, and it might not get high enough. So when you have light clubs and flexible clubs, they go more up in the air, right?
Yes.
More torque, more twist in the golf club. Nice for feel. If you swing really fast, though, and your club's twisting like a saloon door, then you've got a problem with face consistency. So we've got to look at the torque in the golf club. So we look at the weight. The things that make it go lower and take spin off it are the stiffness of it, the weight of it, right? Lowering the torque. All of these things create a heavier, lower flight with less spin.
Yeah, I want to hold on there for a second, though, because I don't think people understand the nuance of what you're saying with the spin thing. Stiffer shafts do not create less spin, everybody. Getting a stiffer shaft, if you go, I have too much spin, I need a stiffer shaft, that is not how this works. What does happen is that when you have a shaft that's too soft for you, the club deflects more into impact. So you increase loft as a general statement, and you're going to have the face be rotated improperly. Those conditions create more spin.
Yeah, and I guess I should firm that up too. With different speeds, rhythms, and swings from average players who are out of balance, you create the jiffy pop effect.
So if I hit a driver properly with a lady shaft and hit a driver properly with an extra stiff shaft, I will have the same amount of spin if I got the right launch conditions at impact. If I use a lady shaft, though, I'm less likely to be able to do that because the club is flexing every which way at my downswing because I've deflected too much due to the speed. So the thing people need to understand, you hear on the PGA Tour condition or PGA Tour how low their spin is, and you hear in ads, lower spinning drivers. Yes, you want lower spin with your drivers on average to make sure
amount of spin.
That you hit it the right, or you hit it farther. And most people spin it too much. As you say, appropriate, but most people spin it too much. The thing is, though, stiffer shafts will help the club deflect less, so it's not going to hurt you on the spin numbers, but you can't make your spin super low just by changing your driver. You need to hit it the right way, which is how we get back to launch conditions.
Okay,
which
but
is why
I'm
we
on
should start
shaft.
talking about
Let's
those.
stay on shaft here. So generally speaking, more flexible, lighter, torqueier. These are things that help the ball get more airborne. These are things that help the ball, spin. Some of those issues more than others, have you just noted, but they get the ball up. If your club is too heavy, the shaft is too heavy, doesn't torque much at all, it'll feel lifeless hard, and it'll tend to make the club not deflect as well. The ball will go lower. It'll tend to stay out to your open side, so little blocks and pushes and that sort of thing, right? That's golf shaft stuff. Then we're into the club head. Now we're into the club head. And we've got the angle of the face, open, closed, or square. We've got the amount of loft on the golf club. We've got the center of gravity of the golf club. And we've got where you're hitting it on the face. So let's assume, let's not get into gear effect, but just generally speaking, we can raise the golf ball by lowering the center of gravity and moving it back. We can raise the golf ball by adding loft. There are ways we can do it that way too. So when you look at your driver and you start listening to us talking about all the variables from the length of the club and how that affects the path maybe and how you can square the club, and then all the variables in the shaft and all the variables in the head, it's a bit of a process to find the right one. Your odds of going into a store and finding it are pretty minimal, right?
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. But we keep promising talking about launch conditions and what launch conditions you need, and we went down the rabbit hole.
We are, because we're saying that you've got to look at the length of the club, you've got to look at the shaft conditions, you've got to look at the head conditions and everything.
Totally agree. That's all 100% true to get the right driver. But assuming we have the right driver now, what do we have to do to make the ball fly the right way? That's, I guess, the question I'm asking.
Go ahead.
So, well, number one, most people need to hit the ball higher in the air, I think is a fair statement. We were discussing this earlier. I think in some cases lower is better. But as a general statement, most people need to have more lofted impact. That's why everyone who goes and buys an 8.5 degree driver, because they want to have it low and hit it low and have a lot of roll, doesn't tend to hit the ball as far as they should.
Yeah, the industry's been doing a pretty good job trying to educate us. Ever since I bought my first Vector launch monitor in 2004, the industry's been telling us that at certain club head speed, there's an optimum launch, and it's higher than you think. So, for most people, that 94 miles an hour guy, he's up in the 14-degree launch range, launch angle, right? You want to get the ball up in the air.
Let's use some examples. So for me, I swing at about 115 to 118 miles an hour, depending on the golf swing. So I need to launch it at about 10 degrees at impact. The reason I need to launch it lower than that 14 you just mentioned is for the same reason that if I pull a bowstring back on a bow, I need to aim more at the target. More speed, you need flatter flight to make sure you just don't balloon it up in the air and lose the shot. So I need about 10 degrees of launch off my face. I swing up at the ball about 2 degrees, which we'll get to in a second. That's important to hitting a proper driver, which means if I have 2 degrees up on the golf ball, I need about an 8-degree driver to have those two mix to provide 10 degrees of vertical launch.
Plus you got deflection and toe droop.
So there's more factor than that, absolutely. But as a general statement, if you hit up on the ball about 2 degrees and have 2 or 8 degrees aloft on your driver, you're going to be about 10, 11, 12 degrees of vertical launch, which is right for me. If I'm swinging at 93 miles an hour, I need that 14 number you mentioned. So if I swing 2 degrees up on the golf ball and I have an 8.5 degree driver, I'm not getting 14 degrees of launch. I'm not hitting the ball as far as I should because I'm not putting the ball the right height in the air to maximize my air time and roll ratio. You do need roll. If you go super high in the air and it just comes down and plops in the middle of the fairway, you lose distance. As a guy who hits it high in Canada, I can attest to that.
Yeah.
I don't get a lot of roll in my drives. I'd hit it farther if I did. But you need to make sure that you're flighting the amount of time in the air is as much as you can get so that you can optimize that and then still have it roll out.
And there are optimized numbers. You can see them on, go to any launch monitor company's website or even just Google optimum driver golf launch conditions, and they'll be there. It'll tell you that at 89, you should be, 14.4, and at 93, you should be 14.1, and at 115, you should be 10.8. It'll tell you what that proper launch angle is based on club head speed and ball speed on a good hit. It'll tell you that.
So especially for our average golfers, which, as you mentioned, go down and across the golf ball because they're outside and with their path, you're hitting down on the ball. So you're really not helping the club out very much. You're not adding loft to the golf or to the driver like you're supposed to with the driver by hitting up on it. So you actually need more loft because your angle of attack is diminishing the loft that you have at impact.
Yeah, you need a swing change. You can't really hit down on the ball and do well. But that's why you hit your 3-wood better than your driver, right?
That's a great point. That's why a lot of people hit their 3-wood better than the driver because the 3-wood has more loft and it's a shorter shaft.
By the way, everybody, if you can follow that a bit in the swing, if your arms throw out at the top of your swing and you're swinging from out to in and down in towards you, you're hitting down through the ball more. Whereas think of a guy hitting a cross-court shot in tennis, and if the racket's way behind him and he slings it past him, he hits that cross-court shot. That's a hook coming from inside or under. So people who draw the ball, hook the ball, are coming in from a shallower vertical angle than if you're hitting from outside to in, right?
Yeah.
So just understand that a little bit. But more loft is a good thing in a driver.
Yeah, for most people, more loft is a good thing because it gets the ball up in the air more than you
As
need.
we said, 70% of people are probably out to in, which means you're usually down at the golf ball. So you've got to do that for
Yeah.
sure.
I mean, I think part of the thing even just comes from an understanding of how the balls are supposed to fly. I don't think most people understand your driver is supposed to fly at the same height as your 7-iron. It just happens further down range. So let's use tour numbers as an example. The PGA Tour, they average about 95 feet in the air with a 7-iron. They also average about 95 feet in the air with a driver. So it's not that the driver is supposed to fly lower. I think a lot of people go, wow, that looks like it's flying too high.
I hit my 9-iron way up in the air and I hit it.
Exactly. What happens is you hit it up there faster. Your vertical launch, the angle it takes off at, is higher with a 9-iron than a driver. So you see it get up there much quicker, and it got to that height closer to you. So it looks higher due to perspective. So we used to think that the 9-iron went higher because we didn't have the technology that told us or gave us the perspective
numbers,
on perspective.
The total height numbers.
Yeah. So what actually should happen is all of your shots should flight at a very similar number. And if you can do that, again, you'll maximize your distance. So you just need to find the right loft in your driver, which we're saying is more than you probably have, to make sure that happens. And if you can do that, it'll go a lot farther in the air. And if you hit it at the right height, it'll also roll on the ground properly for you. I'm not saying hit it super, 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 super high.
Yeah.
I'm just saying higher than you think is probably right for most players.
Yeah.
If you're in the wind in the middle of Georgia on a super firm fairway, I'm wrong. Because at that case, the wind is probably going to do too much to your golf ball if you hit it high, and you're getting so much roll in those baked out conditions, like Carnoustie at the Open last year, that you can hit it low and have it go far. But as a general statement, especially in Canada where we don't have those conditions, height is a good thing.
Yeah, depending on your condition, right? Firm and fast. Sometimes, if I go to Ireland and it's 60K winds and everything's baked out, I actually want a lower launch.
Yeah.
And it's great today. We have adjustable drivers. I can move my driver down 1.5 degrees and hit basically a shot that launches lower, but is going to come down at a better descending angle to kick forward and run down the fairway. Generally speaking, though, you're right, Jake, that especially in Canada here, but everywhere, that airtime is really great. Getting the ball flying and spinning properly is really great. And you just got to pay attention to so many different elements that getting fit is so important. I mean, by the time you tweak the length, you find the right weight of shaft, the right stiffness, the one that feels great because of the amount of torque, and then you put that club head on there that has the right amount of loft for the person's attack conditions, whether they're a little down and across or not, and you adjust the angle of the face, you can find something that gives you a lot more. I mean, that's all. I mean, so far, I don't know how far we are into this. I don't even know. We got to get to a few minutes on the swing. I mean, we've just talked about launch conditions and the club and how difficult it is to get it to react properly. But and the fact that a solid hit's better than a glancing hit. But so getting fit is a huge part of this equation.
Yeah, and making sure you hit the ball solidly with the right conditions. So let's just recap for a second what those conditions are, because we're talking a lot about it, but just put it in a little bubble here. With a driver, you want to be a lot like the LPGA Tour averages. If you look up TrackMan LPGA Tour averages, there's a great chart that comes up that'll show you this right on Google Images. But as a general statement, you want to be swinging up on the ball about 3 degrees, which is much easier to do. Is, like you said, you come a little bit from inside the ball. The club moves around you and inside, a little more shallow. You want to be hit about 3 degrees up on the golf ball. You want to have that vertical launch about 14, somewhere in that range to get the ball up in the air, which I believe the LPGA Tour numbers are a little lower than that. But as a general statement for most people to maximize distance, a little higher is a good thing. And then you want to make sure that you hit the ball in the center of the face with not a lot of rotation coming through it to make sure that the centerness of hit provides the right smash factor to transfer ball energy into the golf ball and hit the ball as far as possible. I don't think we've defined
smash factor. Smash factor is ball speed relative to club head speed. So if your club head speed's moving 100 and your ball speed is moving 150, that's a 1.5 smash, which is considered about perfect.
Yeah, it's about as good as it gets.
If you have the right path, the right face. And on the LPGA Tour and on the PGA Tour with a driver, they average 1.48. So with the right club and the right swing, the right path, and a square hit, they average 1.48. What do you think the average is, would you say, that we see? I think it's in the 130s, high 130s.
Yeah, I think,
better players will be 142 to 146.
The Golf Digest article you mentioned says smash factor for average is only about 1.42, but that's taking all players into account. It's taking all the better players into account too. I think if you just look at the average 20 handicap, I would have said 1.38 would have been my number in my head.
Which means 100 miles an hour is only 138
miles an hour ball speed, and depending
on losing
your launch conditions, that's 2.5 yards about. Depending on the launch conditions.
Again, 2.5 yards
per mile an hour of ball speed.
So
with
if 150 is good and you're 138, that's 12 yards times 2.5 is you're losing about 30 yards of distance,
and
which is probably what Golf Digest and Arcos is coming up with.
That's where we get that 255 number. That's a good hit with a 94 mile an hour golf swing.
So many topics, so many angles and everything. Bottom line, everybody, get fit for a driver from a pro. Try to get enough loft, not too long a club, a golf shaft that suits you. You set up that head properly, and there's potentially, without a swing change, 20 yards, 30 yards. I've seen people have, a Costco driver that is just terrible.
Yeah.
It's made of aluminum or something, and I've gained people 50 yards. But generally speaking, a better club, a better fit club can lead to handfuls of yards. And then if you get into working on your golf swing a little bit to hit it farther, now we can get a handful more, right? And the advice we gave early in the show is don't overswing. Don't try to make your backswing bigger, because the centeredness of hit with the right club is what creates your optimum launch conditions, not just trying to wail at it and mishitting it and having your path be all wrong. So calm the swings down. What are the couple of let's do a few minutes on swing, Jake. What are a couple of things that people need to do from a golf swing perspective to hit their driver better? I mean, we said don't sway, don't lift, don't overswing.
Yeah, I think the simplest thing to add to that is careful with the speed of your transition. We were getting at this a little bit earlier, that good kinematics and good swings look proper. But part of the reason they look proper is the transition move, the change of direction is not too fast.
Yeah, I don't think it's much to say, Jake, that if you swing 5 miles an hour slower, which is a big number, because you're careful and you make sure your legs lead your downswing, if you get better path numbers and better squareness of hit numbers that reflect into smash factor and ball speed, you might gain 12 yards with 5 miles an hour slower swing.
Yeah, that's what we're getting at with the...
When I swing slower, I hit it better.
Yeah.
Right? When I swing slower, I hit it better.
So the thing people need to understand is not about where you have the speed, not about how much speed you have overall, it's where you have it. Really what matters is that at impact, the club is moving quickly. Because, again, quick speed at impact with proper conditions will produce speed. How fast it goes up at the top of your backswing is almost irrelevant. Because if you pull the club down, not only will you get out of sequence like we've been getting at, you go over the top because your arms start your downswing, but you're dumping all your speed too early. You're wasting your energy making it move fast at the top of your swing instead of having it move fast.
Everyone listening will know what casting is. That's casting. When the shoulders open, the arms flail, the club head swings out, you cast the golf club.
And that's one of the main reasons why golf pros, it looks like their swings are so rhythmic and balanced. It's because they're not quick from the top. Think of a F1 race. If you ever watch F1, the guys who are going the fastest almost look like they're going the slowest, right? I've heard that in racing.
The lines are cleaner.
Exactly. They're going through the corners properly and they're speeding up at the right point. So your eye is noticing the fact that it looks like everything's
interesting.
Working properly.
I've had a million people say to me, it looks like you're not even doing anything and the ball goes so far. But I've used the triple axel jump or the quad now in figure skating. We don't know anything about coaching figure skating or neither do you, listener, but you can kind of tell when a guy's or a gal is perfectly vertical and spinning properly. It looks easy.
Yes.
It looks like they're going to land it. Whereas when they're a little off kilter or an elbow sticking out a bit, it's like, this is going to be a yard sale.
By the way, isn't that extraordinary that we can, I watched figure skating literally every 4 years. And in the middle of watching it, after about an hour of watching it, go, that one was good and that one was bad. And I'm right.
You can tell. Yeah.
And
well, that's why people know a good golf swing. You walk up and down the golf center tee here, and they'll know a good-looking swing. And the kinematics make it look smoother and more rhythmic and balanced, right? So really work on your balance, Really work on staying in the middle of your feet. Work on controlling the back swings into those athletic positions, not just longer, bigger positions.
And then understand that it's about where you have your speed. A great way to work on that, by the way, guys.
Change direction slowly.
Change direction slowly, but grab the head or just the shaft just under the head of the golf shaft. Basically, turn your club around and take some swings without trying to hit a ball. And make you'll notice the club makes a whooshing sound as the grip travels through the air. Make that whoosh not loud at the top of your backswing, but at the bottom where the golf ball is. Maximize the whoosh at the golf ball.
Swing the grip, and it'll make that swoosh sound, and you want to as late into the swing as you can get it.
And it'll give you a really good feeling of what the tempo should feel like, and then your goal is to recreate that when you actually have a golf ball in front of you.
That's good. The other, a couple more little things. Not too wide a stance. The yabba dabba do setup with the big wide stance. And we think we're really going to hit it because we're really stable. The problem with that is you can't rotate and you can't really even move onto your lead leg. So you might get stuck way on your back foot and really throw your arms at it. So a driver stance should be a little wider than a 3-wood stance, which is a little wider than a 5-iron stance. Your driver stance shouldn't be like you're straddling the Grand Canyon, because we do need weight flow and we need rotation to move the body properly. And too wide a stance will prevent motion, and that's really a bad thing. And I see that a lot. Setup-wise, I also see people will push their hands forward where the ball is, because the ball is supposed to be off your forward heel with a driver, or definitely forward in your stance.
Yeah, it's a bad one.
And when you push the hands forward, sometimes you lean on the front leg. Sometimes you open your alignment up. Now you're going to cut across it again.
Totally.
So keep your hands centered, just to the forward side of your belly button. Keep your stance a little narrower than you think you should, and then control that backswing so you can move properly. And
not to mention, by the way, that
I love 3/4 swings with a driver as a drill. You said turn that club upside down for the whoosh. I love that. I love 3/4 swings. Like, just tee one up and just try to make your club swing on the right path and hit up on the ball a little bit. Just swing back a little ways and then try to hit up on the ball and pop it up in the air. You'll be amazed at how far the ball goes with what you consider a little half or 3/4 motion. Just making sure the club is traveling on the correct path, straight into the back of the ball and not across the golf ball.
And if you're having trouble doing that, pulling your trail foot back behind your lead heel is a good idea to do that too. So just visually, everybody think about setting up. You keep your feet parallel to one another. You keep your feet straight, and then you take your back foot, leave everything else parallel, but take your back foot and pull it back so that the kind of the toe of your back foot
we
is
call
in
it a
line
right
with the
foot
heel.
back drill for righties.
Yeah.
But
so if you do that, what it'll do is it'll make it easier for you to come down on a more inward path to the golf ball.
Yeah, I love
Swing
that drill.
more from the right for right-handed and left for left-handed players. And if you can't make what we're trying to get you to do with the 3/4 swing happen on your own, that will really help you come more from the inside. And so again, you can feel what that feels like coming into the golf ball, but you can also see how drastically different you'll hit the golf
a
ball.
lesson's going to help, but technique, square hit, better smash, more ball speed, even if your swing feels shorter and feels like you're doing less, is so great. And then we go to that whole first part of today's conversation about launch conditions and getting a shorter club and getting the head set the right way, getting the right shaft for us. And that combination can just lead to magic. Without a ton of work. By the way, a couple of lessons, a launch session, try a few drivers within the course of a few weeks, and you can really completely change the way you hit it off the tee. More speed, more consistency, better balance, more solid hits, more fun. Right now, it's probably your club's too long. The shaft may not fit you because you weren't fitted right. Head conditions might be set up wrong. You bought it based on a name brand or an advertising in a magazine. And then you've got this urge to really try to hit it hard. And so your conditions into the golf ball are all faulty, and it really leads to mishits. I guess, bottom line, Jake, we could have saved an hour and 10 minutes of our lives. If you can create the right impact path and launch conditions, regardless of the length of your swing and other things, you'll hit the ball a lot better.
Yeah, the simple answer is speed week. What makes more speed? You hit the ball better. I mean, it's really contact. Really simple. And then once you're from the right path, once you have a driver that suits you, is your swing in good balance so that you can turn through the golf ball as fast as you are able to? Because that's really what it is.
Every time.
If you can turn through the golf ball better with the right conditions, you will hit the ball farther.
Yeah.
But you can't turn through the ball better if your backswing's cumbersome and
You know,
big
it's
and you're out of
interesting.
position.
A few other speed things. If your grip is right and you set your wrist properly, if they load and unload and then your kinematic sequence right on the way down, the wrist will unhinge better. They'll hinge better. They'll set better at the top if your grip is correct.
It's
and
like
then
cracking
they'll
a whip.
unhinge.
There's more
Timing
lag,
is better. Correct.
so it whips into the golf ball
If you
stronger.
maintain your lead arm extension, which means I don't like a straight arm. If you lock your arm, you'll get tension in your shoulder and you won't be as flexible. But if you maintain extension instead of folding your arm, then your arc size will be a little bigger.
Yeah,
If you're 6'2" instead of 5'8", your arc size will be a little bit bigger too. Bigger arc, potentially more speed if the swing is right. And then the other one, which is really important, that I always think of Sergio Garcia and Brooke Henderson turning through that ball so quickly. If you can rotate your pelvis quicker because you're in balance and more athletic and maybe have some core strength, then the club will move faster again. So there are things we can do. We can get ourselves in better shape, rotate through the ball better, set the club better, maintain extension better in our golf swing, keep the width of our arc a little wider. But really, if we can change the path and get a club that suits what we do, that's where the magic really happens.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, we could do a whole nother hour-long podcast easily on the, fine technical things of your golf swing to maximize
we'll do that
every
at
inch of
some
power. And I think we should at some point, but I agree with you. Really, for most people, it's about hitting it more square, which means simpler, more efficient, balanced golf swings in the ways that we're talking about, and then get a club that suits you, and boom goes the dynamite. You're hitting it farther.
Yeah, and don't forget our little thing we said earlier. When I dressed up in the Gears 3D motion capture suit, and I swung a 7-iron and a driver, my body, basically my unwind was very similar with
Very
both clubs.
similar. And if
So
anything, it was
imagine you're
faster
hitting a
with the
6-iron or a 7-iron when you're swinging your driver.
Yeah, let the club do the work. Maybe that's a good, simple way to say it. Let the club do the job you bought it for. If you buy the right club that suits you right, it'll have a better chance of doing that.
Yeah, get out of the way a little bit. All right, anything else? We good with that?
No, I think we're great.
If you want to reach out to us, it's at Kevin Haime on Twitter. Where are you, Jake?
At JKMPGA
On Twitter.
on Twitter.
You can reach us through Instagram, Kevin Haime on Instagram. We're on
JKMP
Facebook as
Instagram too.
well. You can contact us here through our website, kevinhaime.com, and reach out with questions that you have or things we might have said that are confusing a little bit. On a podcast, it's funny, Jake, because you get into these long conversations, and sometimes you do go down a rabbit hole, and I'm almost listening to us going, man, we are giving some technical stuff rapid fire here, right? So if you do have questions, you can reach out to us, but I think these conversations are good because they're just more natural, and there's a lot of little hidden gems kind of within all of them, right? But
Ask
we
questions.
got
Let
enough
us know what
stuff
you
today.
think. We'd love to hear from everybody.
I think
It's
we
great.
got enough stuff today. There's enough stuff there, enough ideas. If you took a person, I tell you what I would do. I would narrow their stance a bit. I'd make sure their setup was square and the ball was forward.
Yep.
Teed up, not you see a low tee, that's a bad sign. That means the person's hitting down it.
Yeah.
Nice high tee. And I would, narrow the stance a bit, try to make a nice controlled backswing rotation in posture with a club that's not too long for me. And then I'd really have them work on those drills we talked about, that right foot back drill, the little 3/4 swings, to find the right path and have an easier time having a square face through impact. And then bang, ball speed, right? Launch conditions, the right spin conditions, and ball speed, and you maximize how far you can hit the golf ball, not by trying to make your swing bigger or faster. That's a really good message to close out.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what it boils down to, right? It's ball speed, not club head speed.
Thanks, bud.
Thank you.